I'm Fran. I edit ACCU's Overload magazine, and I've mostly been in cyberspace for the last 2 years, and Zoom calls, and I know I'm not the only person. So this gave me a valuable opportunity to think about how crowds move in space. My go-to problem is to use a paper bag and then run some simulations or do some machine learning for me to learn, see what happens. So I'm going to take it nice and slow this afternoon. There's not going to be much code, just give you a hint of how to do these kinds of things. There's not actually any rocket science in this. In fact, there's even less rocket science than there was before, because Robin had a sneak preview and pointed out I've muddled up some of my terms, so I've got rid of some of the maths as well as some of the code. We're mostly going to see blobs moving in space this afternoon and think about how to interact in what some people refer to as meat space, having been in cyberspace for so long, just to get us back into the idea of interacting with people. So I'll look through some swarms and then various other things moving through space. Gradually add in some extra ideas, but they're going to be paper bags all the way through it. I don't know if you've ever done that. If you watch things moving around in space, be that cars or people or ants or whatever, you learn things. I went to stay with family several years ago, and I was reliably informed there was an ant infestation in the kitchen, but it was all right, they were going to buy some poison the next day and kill all the ants. I don't think putting loads of poison in your kitchen sounds entirely sensible, and I frequently suffer from insomnia, so of course got up in the middle of the night to get a glass of water and stood still for a long time and watched the ants. I don't know if any of you know about how ants move through space. If you don't, I've given a previous talk about ant colony optimizations. They tend to follow each other in a line, and they'll leave a pheromone trail so that they can follow. They go home, and then they go out, get some food, and then go back. So if you stand and watch ants at 4 o'clock in the morning in a kitchen, or simulations of them in a paper bag, they form lines. And then you can work out where the home is. And their home was in the kitchen bin. So I helpfully gradually moved the bin to the back door, put it out of the back door, waited, and the pheromone trails allowed them to find the bin. They left the kitchen, no poison was put down. I helpfully left a post-it note in the kitchen saying, the bin's now a garden bin and there are no ants. I don't think my family allowed me to go and stay back with them after that. It was something about too many post-it notes in the kitchen and weird behaviour, but it was quite interesting, and no poison was put in the kitchen and no ants died. I was happy, fine. There might be kitchen bins later on if I remember. So, why paper bags? Well, it gives me quite a simple framework for my personal projects to think about things. I was interviewing a candidate for a job years ago, and the guy I was interviewing with came out of the room and said to me afterwards, that candidate couldn't code their way out of a paper bag. And I thought, see, I have imposter syndrome anyway. I don't know how to code my way out of a paper bag. So, like the ants in the kitchen, I thought long and hard about this and came out with a few ways of doing this, which was my first ACCU presentation. And I cheekily printed off a certificate, and several people have signed it, so I think that makes me the authority on the subject. Though I know some members of the audience here have also got certificates. So if you come out with an idea during the course of this talk about how to code your way out of a paper bag, get in touch and I'll send you a certificate. I said I'd do a recap of particle swarm optimizations, if you don't know it, which are similar to ant colony optimizations. Ant colonies draw out the lines to give you a path through a paper bag or space. Particle swarms just try and come to an optimal point. Now, if you do that in a paper bag, that'll give you an X coordinate and a Y coordinate. which is really handy if you want to find two numbers that solve a problem, that make something as big as possible or as small as possible. Whether this falls under machine learning or AI, we could argue about in the bar afterwards if anyone was staying around. The way these work is you have some blobs or particles or things that start off with a random velocity, and as they move around space, they kind of stick with their momentum, the way they're going, but they remember where they've been. The best spot so far, the one that gets closest to solving your specific problem, which might be to get outside a paper bag, might be to minimise the cost of something, use your imagination. So they have memory and they collaborate. So the swarm has an overall best as well, and their velocity changes. Then they were heading one way, but they go, but it was kind of cooler this way, so tempted here. But the whole swarm says it's really cool over here. So they collaborate and they just do like random nudge of each, mix them up, and they all swarm round, and then eventually they escape the paper bag or find the two numbers you're after. And by extension, you could do 3D paper bags, which I have not strayed into yet, but could, and that gives you 3 numbers. And of course, then we can go back into cyberspace and do 4 dimensions, 5 dimensions. Choice is yours. So there's a lot going on there, but there's some randomness. There's the idea of what's good, and there's a collaboration and memory. In the talks we're going to see, in the demos we're going to see this afternoon, there's not going to be any memory because it's Saturday afternoon. We can't remember. And we've been in cyberspace for 2 years, so we've kind of forgotten how to collaborate as well, so we won't have any of that. This algorithm, we choose how many blobs are going to move in space, bosh them in there randomly, and then we've got a while loop. And like I said, they start with a random velocity and just gradually move, and you keep going until you've got a good enough answer or you give up. You know, a lot of machine learning and AI algorithms work like this. There's some randomness going on. There's a for loop or a while loop, and you just iteratively try and improve things. That's it. I've written up the swarms if you want to go away and play with those. Basically, start somewhere, all start moving the same way, and then escape. I've written that and many other ideas of how to code you out of a paper bag up in a book. What I'm going to do today is some new stuff we've not seen before. So, let's start simply. Let's have a paper bag, or 2-dimensional space, and a queue or a line. People walking somewhere, single file of traffic. So they're going to go in one lane, and they're going to move at a constant speed. Nice, orderly queue. We could do a demo of this if this works. So, paper bag, blobs going up, happen to have coloured the first one in yellow. If everyone just sticks to what they're doing, goes at their own velocity, everyone gets out of the paper bag, no blobs are harmed. There they go. Yet another way to code your way out of a paper bag. Not hugely interesting yet, but a variety of things can cause a degree of chaos. So let's see what else we can do. So we've just seen some blobs in space. Again, unlike the swarms and some of the other more complicated things I gave an overview of at the beginning, we've got no memory and got one mission, and that's to do what they want, which is to go at their preferred speed. Well, velocity. They've got a direction. They're going out of the paper bag because that's the point of this talk. So we could represent this with a standard function. I have coded this up in C++. I'm not going to share much of the code, because when I looked through it, I went, my goodness, this is horrific. So I'd like the opportunity to refactor it. If you are interested, it's on Bitbucket, and I might own up to where it is, but I might want the opportunity to make it slightly less scrappy first. But basically, we're going to have a blob, and it's going to have a phi function, because if you read the literature about these kind of models, and this is gearing up towards what's known as the follow the leader model, the velocity is obviously called phi, because that's the way maths and physics works. Yeah, if that function didn't make sense, it's going at like 100 pixels per unit of time, which may be in seconds. I'm not entirely sure that's what's happening, but you can fiddle with that, and bigger the number, quicker it goes, smaller the number, smaller it goes. If you give it a negative number, then it'll go backwards, and I'm not doing any checking for that kind of stuff, and I've just hard-coded it, so that's fine. So I've got a blob with a function. You might think I could have used OO here, but it's Saturday afternoon and I haven't, so I will just inject the function from the outside. You might think calling a function in C++ move is asking for trouble, but it's inside a struct, so it's absolutely fine, and it's Saturday afternoon, so you know. So we're going to have a vector of blobs, which gives us our straight line. And we saw very calm, sensible queue, everyone got out safely. What if this yellow one in front gets the phone out and stops? Or worse, if it's traffic and somebody slams the brakes on? What's going to happen? Well, we could just have a horrible car crash, but what tends to happen in real life, and this is an attempt at a simulation of what kind of things might happen in meat space rather than cyberspace. You tend to, if the person in front of you stops, you notice before you crash into them, unless you're looking at your phone as well, and you'll slow off and stop. If you had a self-driving car and that noticed, or a car with some AI on board that noticed, it wouldn't suddenly slam the brakes on, because it would then possibly throw you out the windscreen. So there's some of this model's built into some self-driving cars as well and things to just slow you off. So the leader's going to do what they want, going at their preferred velocity, and then just stop gratuitously. And then whoever's behind them is going to have to adapt their behaviour to deal with this inconsiderateness. We just need one small change to our standard function we called phi. Well, maybe one small change. So the leader does what they want. When? Well, I don't know. We can do a variety of things here. This is going to be following what's called an implicit model. It doesn't care about the state of the world. It's ignoring this W parameter on the end. Just if it's at a certain time, they're going to stop because they can. And before that time and after that time, back to this 100 units per unit. So that's quite a simple change for the leader, the yellow one at the front. The ones behind have to pay a bit more attention. Maybe keep 2 meters apart, or whatever your social distancing rules were for your country. We don't need to do any collision detection and things at this point, because no one's going to collide, because the maths falls out like this. If we slow off and we get the right modelling equation, no blobs are going to be crushed during the course of the next demo, so that's good, provided we get the phi function right. So we're sending this state of the world, this W, to our phi, so you can see how close the next blob is. So now, instead of pivoting on the time being sent in, which remember the front person's going to do, they're just going to suddenly stop at a given time, the following ones are go, oh, I'm getting a bit close. And once they're really close, they're just going to stop. So that's the else. If they're far enough away, they're still doing their dt times the 100. But if we bolt in this 1 minus e to the w minus 40, that 40 deliberately matches the 40 in the if. I could have drawn attention to that with a constant, but it's Saturday afternoon and I've just boshed the same magic number in the same place. If you think about it, as the w gets closer to 40, we're going to end up with a 1 take 1. So 10 to the 100 times dt, normal circumstances, and then close down, slow off slowly rather than slamming the brakes on. If you unwrap that simple thing that we were doing just now, which was just some multiplying really with the exponential part going on, driven by the distance to the one in front, so x plus 1 compared to just x if they're all lined up. We're flexing on the distance between things there. There's our phi function in this discrete case at the top. If it wasn't Saturday afternoon and I finished reading the book, I treated myself to, then we could do some rocket science. But the subtitle for this isn't rocket science. This is just an entry level into some of the rocket science and transport equations. We won't worry about that. We've got one row of blobs and the front one's misbehaving. Has Fran done any demos yet? She's done one demo, but now we're going to have the yellow blob stopping. So that, I've changed the 5 functions. Yellow one's going to gratuitously stop, and the other one's going to keep that distance using that exponential function to slow off smoothly. Yes. But it's all right. Starts moving again. One's near the bottom of the screen, they're possibly going, what just happened there? Strange. Oh, we're moving again. No blobs were crushed in the course of the demo. And we're out of the paper bag. And we glanced at some rocket science on the way, but it's Saturday afternoon, so we don't need to go into that. What did we just see? That happens when you're in traffic frequently, doesn't it? You stop, and then you go again. What happened? This is known in the trade as a ghost jam. Right, they're also called stop and go waves or phantom waves. And we've just seen a real simple little maths model there that simulates this real life behavior. We can stay safely in cyberspace and not nearly crush into each other. I like that we just started so simple, so we can just go at the constant speed. Little change with the right sort of maths. We'll now start demonstrating slightly more complicated behaviour. Okay, feeling brave now, so we've had a vector of blobs. Time to up our game. We're going to have 2 vectors of blobs now. So this might be dual carriageway of traffic, perhaps. You could use it to simulate all kinds of other things as well if you want. So the blobs so far have had no sense of agency. They're not even as complicated as particle swarms or ants or anything. There's that speed I'm going at, oh, slow down and speed up. We're now going to have loads more yellow blobs. Yellow ones might be a bit fidgety and swap between vectors or lanes for no apparent reason. The blue blobs are just going to, as they were, but they need to, again, slow down if someone gets a bit close in front of them. And let's see what happens. Now, there are lots of ways of trying to model multi-lane traffic setups. We could use cellular automata, which we'll come to later on, but that leads to a completely unrealistic vehicular behaviour model, so we won't do that. And I won't do the proper ways of doing it either. I'll just use what we did just now and kind of hack it together. It sort of work. So, as I said, that paper I just cited, which there's a link if you want to read it. It's really interesting. It's incredibly complicated. There are some slightly simpler ways of doing things, but we're going to really simplify things. 2 vectors, The yellow one, driven by a random number generator, might decide it's in the mood for swapping the lane or not. And in theory, we could change the probability of it swapping lanes. I probably just hard-coded this and I can't even remember what number I used. It doesn't really matter because it's Saturday afternoon. We'll still see some movement going on. I found it surprisingly difficult to choose a blob in one vector and make it move to the right place in the other vector, driven only by the y coordinate. I think I've got them at a point where they're just looking at the one in front. So they might do that thing of like not checking the mirrors and looking at the blind spot when they change lanes. So there might be some near misses. So some blobs might crash slightly, but we can make the model more sophisticated, but it's Saturday afternoon and we're all tired. Let's see what happens. So we see one lane. Now we're going to have 2 lanes. First, everyone's going to stay in their own lane. We're all going to go out. So that's like the one lane, but now I've just got 2 lanes. No bad behaviour. Everyone just minding their own business going forward. No one stopped. Everyone got out. No one crashed. Awesome. But, as I said, I've got some other things we can do here. So, change lane, why not? People do that sometimes. Why? Did you notice that took everyone a bit more time to actually escape the paper bag? You could use this not just to model behaviour of dual carriageway of 2 lanes of traffic. You can use it to model what happens as people move around space. And some of these kind of models are used to design the layouts of buildings and signposting escape routes for people to get out. And we'll start thinking about that a bit more as we do the cellular automata thing. And then we've got 2 types of blobs. We've got the ones who just like go at their own pace. And that one was included some that just gratuitously swap lanes. If I'd gone into having some OO or had a whole army of standard functions, they could have ones who overtook if they could, if they were going at a certain speed. We could have other ones that maliciously undertook all the time, so you could have a left lane or a right lane preference. Or you could vary your preferred speed depending on how busy it was. There's lots of different agencies and behaviours you could build in from really quite a simple model. Right, so the lane changing was annoying, and somebody just slamming on the brakes was annoying. So, I suppose, given the code was there, I slammed it all together. We could have lane changing and brake slamming on, if I've got all my demo files the right way round. And then some blobs have been slightly crushed, but they're in cyberspace, so it could be worse. Don't behave like this in real life, it's dreadful. There, they're all out, but it was just much better when everyone just... And then there wasn't the horrific code that I had to use, but... If you really want some fun, there's an online traffic simulation. There's a link to their GitHub source code, and it's far better than mine, and it's almost certainly not in C++. So, you can, like I said, you can have left lane or right lane bias of which lanes you're going to switch, or a politeness thing to let people run in front. This one, as you can see, has got a ramp coming on, and you can place the traffic lights wherever you want and put speed restrictions in, and it's loads of fun. So go away and play with that instead if you want. But this is a serious thing. You do use models and simulations of this kind of stuff to work out what to put where. Like the kitchen bin going in the garden, but that's how we started. We'll get back to bins if I remember. So what next? We've had a vector of blobs. We've had 2 vectors of blobs. Instead of incrementally building this up, let's just go for broke and have a vector of blobs. A bit like this. So now, we've switched to having a grid pattern, and instead of thinking about floats and continuous points in space, our blobs are going to be at one grid point, and they can move to a neighbouring grid point, which is the fundamentals of how cellular automata behave. Anyone come across cellular automata before? Cool, most people. I should do a speedy recap. So I said you're in one grid point, you can move to a neighbouring grid point. That's the fundamental rules of all CAs. In the literature, there are 2 different types of neighbourhood. There are probably more if you start thinking topologically. There's a Moore neighbourhood, which will allow you to go to 8 other points in space, but it's Saturday afternoon. It's far too complicated. So let's do the von Neumann neighbourhood and just go left, right, up, down, 4 points in space, or stay still, maybe, so 5 options. One really common CA is Conway's Game of Life, if you've not come across these before. That puts blobs in space randomly, and then the state of the world changes according to these 4 rules. And you get all kinds of interesting shapes starting to emerge. For example, the glider pattern at the bottom. If you've not come across it before, go away and play with it. There's loads of open source code, or code it up yourself as your own kata. To put them in a paper bag and see them escape. Or find my talk about that on YouTube. But anyway, I digress. So they start randomly in random places and move by 4 clearly defined rules. I'm going to line up 25 blobs at the bottom of a paper bag, so I'm not going to start randomly. And then they're going to move stochastically. Know the word stochastic? Just means random, right? So Conway's Game of Life started randomly and then obeyed 4 rules. My lot are going to start deterministically in a line and then move randomly. You could use this sort of thing to model how people might move in space. Imagine there were about 25 of us in the room. I've got 25 blobs there. We'll go out into the foyer afterwards. And we're all a bit dazed because it's Saturday afternoon and we've been in cyberspace for 2 years. We just moved to neighbouring spots, trying to work our way towards the exit. Just have that in your mind as we go. So, as I said, we've got a von Neumann neighbourhood because that just gives me 5 things to consider. Staying still, so moving 0, 0. Well, then going left, right, up, or down. I'm going to enforce that these blobs don't stand on each other, which is fair. And I'm not going to let them bust through the edges or the bottom of the bag, because it's my simulation, and perhaps I am still in cyberspace, so it's my rules, so it's fine. You can make up your own rules. Now, the probabilistic bit here, the stochastic bit here, the random bit here, is of all these 5 places I could go, how do I choose? Well, we'll see. And then there's 2 update schemes for any cellular automata. Conway's Game of Life has the state of the world and then updates everything according to the rules and has a new state of the world. If I do that here, and I've got 2 blobs, one decides to go left and the other decides to go right, they would be standing on each other and then I'll have to do some kind of collision detection, have to have them fight it out or see who's more committed, or so it's easier just to move one blob and then move the next blob rather than wholesale replace the world in each bit in my for loop. You could do other ways, like I said, do everything moving at once, which might be more realistic, but it's more complicated. And nice simple simulations for what might in fact be Saturday afternoon in cyberspace. How can you tell anymore? Oh. So we've got 5 possible moves. I'm going to have my vector of blobs in a grid. Then the grid can say, no, you can't go there because that's the edge and things. And it allowed me to keep stats if I wanted and check whether things are going to stand on someone else, etc. This is an important idea and we'll build on it as we go. The blobs want to move. And maybe, like I said, imagine you're in the foyer trying to get out of the exit. Maybe you can see an exit sign and you go, oh, I'm tempted to go that way. A way of running any kinds of simulations like this, and you see the same in some quite serious physics, involves the idea of what's called a static floor field. It's static because you set it up at the beginning of your simulation, and it doesn't change. It's a floor field because it's about the surface or space you're moving through. So I could set up what I'd like to call, in this simulation, a door field. So imagine our paper bag. If you're at the bottom row is 0, not tempting, been there, and I'm trying to go towards the door. The bigger the number, the more tempting. Doors at the top, so that's 5 increments, off we go. Well, I could do that, but I have my nice grid with my vector of blobs, and then I'd need a vector of ints for my door field or static floor field. Gone the wrong way. So I could just cheat at this point, and of course that's good enough, and if you're running a simulation it's good enough, then it's good enough. So for now, the blob's going to have a weighting function for a potential move, however much X, however much Y. And the blobs for now are just going to go, if it's going up, I'm 3 times more tempted. Anything else, fine. I'll give that a value of 1. But up, yes. If you're used to doing computer graphics and similar drawing code type things, my background's mathematics, and I get very confused with 0, 0 being at the top rather than the bottom. If you can hack it the other way around, that's fine. I can't, that's why it's this way round, if that's confused anyone. But basically, the blobs will be given some possible moves up to 5, possibly including 5. Some of them might be disallowed, but somebody might be stood there. They'll assign them a weighting, and then I can use a standard discrete distribution to just pick one of those, and that's more likely to pick the ones with the larger weighting, but it might pick one of the other ones, and that's how we get our stochastic cellular automata. I said those were static floor fields. We could do dynamic floor fields that change, but we'll come to that. So 3 for up, everything else is 1. The discrete distribution's more likely to pick up, but we might do something else. As I said, we're just going to update 1 blob at a time, so as I don't need to look out for people wanting to go to the same place. These blobs don't remember where they've been, unlike the swarms we saw at the beginning, so they might keep going the wrong way. Anything could happen. It says do a demo, so we'll do a demo. 25 blobs, 5 possible places for each one to move. static floor field. Tired, sleepy blobs, not paying much attention, want to go forwards to someone in the way, want to go forward to someone in the way. If we got a bit more of a dynamic situation, you could do things like line of sight to see what's going on. But actually, this is quite important. You can use this kind of thing for how do you get people out in a fire. And sometimes exits do get blocked for other downstream reasons. And there are reasons why they put lights on exit signs and then turn some of them off. Somebody might be watching and going, oh, let's make it a dynamic floor field and encourage this last blob that is trying to get out of the way, but people are blocking the door. Don't block the door. Might take a while. I just made the space they can move in one line higher than the paper bag. Hey, well done. Yeah, well, the blob's sleepy and some of them are not being very considerate. Don't do that. Don't slam the brakes on. Don't suddenly stop. Don't swerve around all over the place. Don't stand in doorways. I could, of course, make the world a bit bigger. Then they won't stand in doorways. And guess what? They don't stand in the doorway, then everyone escapes the building quicker. On average, this is stochastic, and that's the best you can say about stochastic setups. Right. Much better. I mean, it depends what you're optimizing for. I definitely left the bag quicker, just by the blobs not standing in the doorway. How many times do people do that, though? You go to leave a room, and I know why you do it, because we've been in cyberspace for a couple of years and forgotten how this works. You go, oh, don't know where to go. Well, maybe then not swerve over to the side, check your mirrors, stand aside, let people through, and just have your own little personal meltdown, not right in the main corridor or something. Just a suggestion. Or make Fran make the simulation bigger so there's more space for you. I'm very sorry. Yeah, and at that point you can start measuring things and looking at averages and variation. It's quite a frivolous little setup there, but you can see how you could use that for more serious things. And it doesn't have to be a paper bag shape. You could have actual roads going on, or rooms, or corridors, and we could go into three-dimensional space and have staircases and all kinds of things, but not on a Saturday afternoon. If people standing in the door are getting in the way, and this is my simulation, I could put obstacles wherever I like. And actually, sometimes when people have looked at space, they will deliberately put obstacles to try and funnel people in a more direct route through things. And they will have run simulations and done some maths to work out where to put things. Quite often you'll find a couple of bollards or similar near a door. Like, why are they there? But if you were to stand and watch, like I was watching the ants in the kitchen at 4 a.m. many years ago, you'll see behaviour emerging and, you know. Only we've been quite unkind to these blobs and they're tired. And what if so? For obstacles, they mustn't stand on them, so we've got more edge detection to do. That's simple, do that. Better than obstacles, tables with tea and cake, perhaps, or similar. So imagine you've got 25 hungry blobs at a conference walking through a foyer. They kind of want to go for the train, but they kind of want a cup of tea and a cake because they're quite hungry before they then go to the door. I can use my last code that I haven't showed you, but if you want me to share the code, I'll let you know once I've tidied it up. So we could put some different kinds of blobs in the paper bag with one small change. Well, we need the one small change to stop you standing on the table, because that would just be gratuitous. If you want to do your own simulations, you could let that happen, but then it goes a bit three-dimensional, and that's beyond me at the moment this afternoon. So each table is going to have a temptation value, and it's going to have an amount of food or drink, or so it's going to have an int representing something tempting. And we had the door field or the static floor field before, so it's going to be a disturbance in cyberspace that adds a temptation value around the table where the food is. So it's going to be numbers that I assign to points in space. So this time I really am going to have to bite the bullet and not just bosh in a 3 or a 1 depending. So I am going to have a vector of ints, which I can cope with, I think. And that's going to be like the door field we had before, but it's going to indicate where the tables are. Because as you move through space, maybe the nearer you are, the more likely you are to reach out and go, don't mind if I do. Or you're more likely to notice it. It could be there's a big sign up saying tea here, coffee here, or something. So it could be an indication of how obvious the placing of the food and drink is. The blobs need to be hungry to a point, and then when they're no longer hungry, when they've satisfied their own personal mission, they revert back to the previous behaviour of going towards the door. I played around with this a bit, and I decided the blob was going to look at the weighting of each of the neighbouring spots on the floor, and I decided to square it. Because if I just left it at the linear level, then that didn't seem very convincing. For why? Well, so we saw the door field before. Imagine the black star is cake on a table or something. If I say make this table 2 level of temptation, which like I said could be an analogy of a sign up saying cake here, or a massive cake that you can see from 2 meters away, or something like that. So immediately beside it, 2, in my roulette wheel temptation mental model from before. Slightly further away, 1. Questions. And this took me a long time to decide how to code up and what to do about it. If I put some more sandwiches here, or cups of tea, or cake, I've got options as to what I can do with the floor field at this point. What I decided to do was, if you think about it, if the new table of food had a 2 and then a 1, I could end up with 3s down the middle. But it's not, in real life, more tempting to go and stand between 2 tables so you can stuff your face. Well, it might be for some people, but then I'll need loads of different types of blob behaviour, and keeping it simple today. So I just decided to make it tempting to be near enough to the table to get what you're after, rather than I want to be in the middle, I'm able to feed both sides of my face simultaneously. But also, it's now, okay, on one level it's twice as tempting to move from the point that's 1 to the point that's 2. But on the other hand, it's only 1 more tempting. Whereas, if I square the number, then it is much more tempting. So that might hurry them along, get your tea and cake, and then off you poodle. There's something you can play with, and it depends what you're trying to simulate and what you're really up to here. But the point is, with the static floor field, you don't need to take the number as it is. You can then apply a function to it. It depends what you're trying to simulate. So they could also keep blocking the door, as happened before. We could have a word with them. I've made that a parameter to my code, and I can't remember which parameter's which means I need to actually make my code much easier to use than I'll remember what it was doing. But it's Saturday afternoon, and we haven't got time to sort that out. Where are we going to put the tables? Ah, well. They could go anywhere. Fear not, I'll come out with a brilliant suggestion, which might explain why I've not ended up in a career as a party planner or anything, but I'm getting ahead of myself. I need to decide the temptation level for the tables, how much food to put on the tables, how hungry are the blobs. And I've allowed the blobs to keep eating if they really want to. So start off blue, and if they've overindulged, they will go green. I'm not sure how well that's going to show further down. That doesn't really matter. The aim is they'll eat, and then they'll start going up, and then they'll leave, and everyone's had enough food. If I've put the tables in the right place and put enough food there. And the tables are going to go white when there's no food left. But we're going to save a static floor field, so the tables are still there, so the blobs might go, oh, table, oh, no food. And unlike the swarms I mentioned earlier, they've got no memory, so then they go, oh, table, oh, table. And they won't collaborate with each other, unlike the swarms I mentioned earlier. So some of them might go, oh, lost sarnie, and then find loads more sarnies, even though they're stuffed, and eat them rather than telling other people in the room, there's some tea and cake over here. Not collaborating, but we simplified everything for this demo this afternoon. You could encourage them to collaborate and then things might pan out differently. So, blobs in space. Right, blue, hungry, green, stuffed, magenta, left the building and didn't have enough food. Yellow, tables with food on. Gone white, no food left. Wonder if that means I'm meant to be doing a demo. It might do. Let's find out. Let's do a demo anyway. What does this one do? Now look. Line of tables with some food on. If I press the space bar, it pauses and reminds me where we've got to. So overall, 91 more slices of cake are required, or maybe cups of tea. 24 slices of cake, overindulgence or greed. And there's 64 slices of cake left. So could work. Does it show nearer the back, the bottom table's gone white? No, maybe. Anyway. Well, some of the green ones are kind of wending their way out of the room and blocking the door. Well, we've had words with them about that already. Never mind. Yeah, see. No food left. There was precisely enough food, apparently, but 60 pieces of cake have been eaten by people who weren't actually hungry anymore. It was just there and they ate it, and the other blue blobs are still hungry. So they're just keep going, oh, table, oh, table. Maybe I've put the tables in the wrong place. Maybe I've not put enough food out. Yeah, let's put loads more food out. That might work. I guess the blue blob on the left couldn't see the table from over there or something. Yeah, sometimes you do need big, clear signs saying there's some teas over here, cakes over here. Or sometimes you'll have people moving around saying, would you like to go this way, please, to help you navigate around space? But then I'll have to have different types of blobs with different behaviour. But everyone's been fed this time, but I've wasted loads of food, and I wonder if I could try and optimise it a bit. As soon as you start running a simulation, then you can start thinking about, okay, what do I actually want to happen? All right, I don't want to waste food. Maybe I want to get everyone out as quickly as possible. Maybe I don't. Maybe I want them to hang around and chat. Options. Could try and randomly place the tables. Well, I suppose at the moment we've just had them in one line in the middle though. Let's try a different configuration first. If I can remember which demos I've got, that seems more plausible. Some nearby, of course they've all piled out of the room and stopped by the nearest table because of the static floor field that made it more tempting. And yeah, the green ones went, all right, I'll go to the door. Oh, look, I've a sandwich, yay. Stuff my face. And there's some hungry blobs near the bottom going, table, no food. Table. If the greedy blobs had said, oh, there's some this way, then things would have panned out differently. Don't know if that was better or worse, different. But it's making us ask questions about, oh, perhaps we should be collaborating. Or if these stubborn blobs really won't talk to each other, perhaps we should make the tables disappear. But then I'd have to write a dynamic floor field. So in my while loop, I'd have to change the numbers. Perhaps we'll try that in a bit. I guess if I made the floor field a much larger number, then the blue blobs will be able to notice the tables from further away, which might in real life mean, like I said, putting up a big sign or something showing where things were. So if you can't see where things are, then you do tend to be a bit stunned and not sure what to do. Yes, my genius idea of having more tables instead of just one table seems to have not worked. Worth trying, though. Whether it's a realistic simulation or not. It's quite a simple framework, just from the choosing 5 possible moves and having a weighting as to which one you're more likely to go to, maybe driven by, I want to go to the exit, or I want to get something from this type of table. I could have different types of table. Like, oh, wow. But it's Saturday afternoon and I'd have to make my code more comprehensible. I wonder what demo 11 does. Oh, yes, I said in my slides, which I've left loitering in the background, instead of having the 5 tables in a line, I could give up and just randomly place the tables. And I've got a measure of how much food's left and if anyone's hungry. As soon as you set up something randomly and you've got this measure of how good something is, what's the best or good enough, I could have set up some genetic algorithms to figure out where to put all these. As long as I kept track of all the random things I'd tried, then I could have randomly taken some of those tables and some of those tables, mashed them up, got my fitness function, and then the computer could solve the problem for us. But we've only got half an hour left, so that's left as an exercise for the reader. I wonder if I put that on the slides. Oh, yes, more demos. Oh, look, yeah, that's not working very well because most of the tables here are by the door and they can't see them, so they're going, table! That didn't pan out. But that's okay, a genetic algorithm would have sussed that out and would have figured things out for us and worked out how much food to put on each table. But Fran didn't get around to doing that. But that means she's got another project to play with another time, so that's fine. Well, that's the 5 tables. I wonder if we can do better with the 12 by just randomly trying something. The green ones going up. Now, they might take a sarnie on the way through because they're greedy. Yeah, just try one random thing's not enough. You need to try several, and you might as well get the computer to remember what it's done for you and tell you what worked and what didn't. So, but it's Saturday afternoon. There's not much time. You see how you could use this to figure out what might work and change behaviours and have so different blobs behaving in different ways, different types of food. It might not be food or tea or coffee. How are we doing? Yeah, that's not going to work. There's just 20 bits of cake left. And the blue blobs want 83 bits of cake. Failed. I suppose a genetic algorithm or similar could bail out early, and then we could speed things up a bit if we wanted. Now here we go. Hold that thought. Anyone used to play kind of 80s style arcade games? Now I said, like, if you watch them, they do keep going, oh, food, oh, nothing there. So it seems like the presence of the tables, because that's given us a static floor field, drawing the blobs towards the tables. And like I said, a dynamic floor field, I'm gonna have to change my code. One last, I've given up counting tables. This time, random tables, however many you feel like. But this time, the tables disappear when there's no food there, which isn't completely unrealistic, but sometimes people like move trays out of the way or something. Well, that's definitely looking more hopeful. Because now, in my wildlife, if there's no food on the table, poof, table goes, and then that drops the temptation of that bit of the floor, and then the hungry blue blobs are more likely to go, oh, no, not a table, that table. And there we go, yeah. You can deal with these uncooperative, forgetful blobs that can't remember how to move around space. Maybe the tables aren't quite tempting enough. Don't know, but that was just one random smattering of tables. Perhaps randomly separating out tables isn't brilliant. Perhaps my original idea of them being in more of a line was better. Now, it could work, but this demo might take a moment. Well, definitely tables magically disappearing seems to have made things slightly better. It did give me slightly nefarious ideas, which we'll see why I said breakout shortly. Oh, there's a hungry blob, I feel bad, I'm sorry. I don't know, I can't remember. There was a comment from an audience member. What happened to Demo 13. I've skipped to demo. I think that was not full on random. Thank you. Yes, I've missed out demo 13. See, I knew I should have just put links in the slides. Yeah, so that's without me removing the tables. Yeah, well, okay, I've done them the wrong way round, but time couldn't go forwards and back, theoretically, and this is cyberspace, so that's fine. So if I just randomly dump the tables and don't remove them, then you can see there being obstacles, right? Because they're still tempting. So, yeah. Did look more fruitful removing the tables. Yeah, thanks, Dom. I've gone deaf. You're not real. This isn't happening. And these blobs are hungry. But if I remove the tables, it's better. I wonder what demo 15 is. So this time we saw the 4 lots of 3, but this time, if I remove the tables, instead of all the blue blobs staying at the bottom, going table, oh, bother. Once they're not there, they aimlessly wander around until they get near another table. And so tables being removed looks fruitful. Perhaps we're just not put enough food there. Oh, if someone takes one extra slice of cake, someone's going to be very disappointed. Can't trust these blobs. And they're standing in the doorway, and I told you not to do that. It's all right, I've got a parameter, I can stop them doing that. I'll just make the world a bit bigger. Yeah, now look, see, several of you took too much cake, and now, Right, that's it. I'm going for my table layout, which is the best possible table layout if you haven't got genetic algorithms to actually pay attention and keep track of what they're doing. What you do is you line up the tables. No one's getting out of here till you've eaten the cake. I'll put enough cake on the tables. When you've eaten the cake, the table will disappear, and then poof, up you go, and you can break out of the room. I might have obese blobs. I haven't changed the size of them because then that would be quite interesting if I made the blobs become obese as they overate. Then we'd be able to see who'd been the greediest. But then my nice neat vector of vectors, I don't think a vector of vectors would be the right data structure to represent that, because then sometimes, that's a hard problem. I'll just do the genetic algorithms first and try and encourage them not to be quite so greedy.
Please plan that part.
I could do the demo again though. I thought this was a genius idea. Yes. Felix did say, oh, would you help with the planning then? I went, if you want. Actually, there's a reason why if you go to a wedding or something similar to that, there's often people stood right in the doorway or offer you a drink. I was trying to stop you standing in doorways, frankly, because, see, even if we're mindless blobs who come from cyberspace, some people know how to encourage us to move around physical space properly because they've remembered how this works. But yeah, that's my suggested layout, given I didn't get round to doing the genetic algorithms. If I'd done genetic algorithms, it might have come out with a slightly more sensible layout, but it was like playing Breakout, and I sat and watched this for hours, so why not? Anyway, leave them to it. I've got a few slides left. We see my amazing suggestion of where to put things completely in the way, and this is premised on the idea that things completely disappear when they're no longer needed. So there might be some slightly unrealistic elements to this simulation. I'm terribly sorry. But it's Saturday afternoon, and that's actually quite a simple framework. Just going to one of 5 places and doing this. You could move here, or you can't move here, or you're on this mission to get this many points, which could be the food you're eating, or it could be something else. I would say more serious than eating cake. There probably are things more serious than eating cake, but you can see how you could use this to simulate how people might move around space. And you could then see, you could just adjust it slightly, and it was just a vector of blobs, which didn't really have much to them, and a vector of ints to control which bits were more tempting. So, and you can then build on this simplicity. You could have some people who want to stop and talk. Maybe the blob's main mission isn't just to gorge themselves on cake and leave the room. They might want to talk. They might want to talk to specific speakers. We could set up compartments and areas where people could breakout rooms and things. And again, if you look at the literature on this kind of stuff about designing space for people to move around in, they do use cellular automata for this. There are other ways of doing it as well, but this is a real nice simple model for setting things up. And you can give more and more agency to the blobs, so they aren't just kind of mindlessly moving through space. get some sense of what they want to do, want to talk to each other, want to stay in the room for 10 minutes and then leave. You could bolt more and more behaviour on if you want. You could have people coming in, restocking the tables if we do stick with the tables. Wonder what happens if people have got different dietary requirements. I'm vegetarian, and I'm sure I've got in several people's way at lunches by thinking those sandwiches might be all right, oh no, they're not. And I can't see the sign until I've got right in everyone's way. But if you have some clearer signage, sometimes that helps people navigate around this physical space we're not used to. I mean, yeah, and simulations allow you to play with that. And you can also play with real space by trying out things, putting up signs, standing and watching, or standing and watching the ants in the kitchen and going, what are they up to? Oh, interesting. Yeah, just look around you, see what's happening. So I mentioned I could have used genetic algorithms to decide where to put the tables. And actually, unsurprisingly, there is prior art for using genetic algorithms to do room layout. There's also prior art for genetic algorithms designing interior decor, but that's an entirely different matter, and that's not the problem we're trying to solve here. And I really don't see the benefit of that. That's not, might be interesting to some of you. We started with kitchen bins. And I did wonder about whether I got the best data structures for things. Anyone aware of Knoof? Some of you might be. I was chatting to Seb, who I spied towards the back of the room. Hello, Seb. A few days ago, and he pointed out that Knoof helped design his kitchen optimally to make his wife's life easier, making his food for him. So he nobly volunteered to stay still in the kitchen like I did, keeping an eye on the ants, and do some kind of time and motion study, observe what she was up to for a period of time. Didn't interfere in any way with the cooking or anything. And his main conclusion, unlike my conclusion about where the kitchen bin should be placed, was to put the kitchen bin in the middle of the kitchen. So we draw different conclusions by the things we measure and the things we study. So what have we learnt this afternoon? Well, don't stand in doorways. Don't suddenly stop if there are people behind you. Don't swerve lanes or stand in front of someone, or just be considerate of people around you in space. I know we've forgotten how to be in real space, but just some simple guidelines and heuristics help. Don't be greedy. I'll be slightly greedy if you want, but to a point. Remember, oh yeah, there's no food there. Try and remember where you've been. Try and collaborate. Be more like the swarms at the beginning. Remember what you've been up to. Stick to some simple heuristics. Collaborate a bit. For those who aren't ACCU members, Russell Wind has been mentioned several times. He died, I've lost track of which year's which, last year? At some point in the last year and a bit. And we all miss him. And he used to be the conference chair, and he'd always remind us to be excellent to one another with a picture like this. So we miss Russell. And if you didn't have the opportunity to meet him, he was a lovely man, and loads of his talks are still on the internet, so go find some. And on that note, I've written a book that's got stuff, but it hasn't got any of the crowd stuff in. But if you want to learn about genetic algorithms and things, then there's some clues there, or there's some other talks on YouTube if you're interested. But that's me done. Welcome questions. Don't block the doors on the way out. Just keep an eye out for each other.